Have you ever wanted to 3D print exact copies of something? Today, we'll test how possible that is with the CR-T 3D scanner from Creality. "3D printing has been around for a few decades, but it's in the last decade that it's really gained traction in the home hobbyist market. 3D scanning, however, is still somewhat of an anomaly. I have covered 3D scanning before using a Kinect sensor to 3D scan my wife, and then I had a follow-up video showing how to tidy up the mesh in Mesh Mixer before 3D printing the result. I'll be the first to admit that that type of setup is more or less a novelty, and that if you want to scan things that are accurate and usable, you need to change your equipment. Around 7 years ago, I tested a structured light scanner from David Scan. I had a homemade rig with a micro projector, webcam, and a tethered laptop. Structured light scanning works by projecting stripy black and white patterns, with the camera recognizing how they distort over the object and building up a 3D point cloud. After the various sides are stitched back together, you can get a pretty good result, but the entire workflow is very convoluted and not very user-friendly. This CR-T from Creality is a 3D scanner that also uses structured light, so I was pretty keen to test it and see how far the workflow and technology has advanced. Let's start by looking over the specs, showing you how it works, and then testing it with a range of objects. On the Creality website, there's not a great deal of info that makes sense apart from the price, at a pretty significant $8.99 US. Important specs include the maximum size, which is 300 by 200 by 250 millimeters. Accuracy is 0.1 millimeters. The various sides are automatically stitched back together, and there is cloud functionality, but more on that later. When we look at the images, we can see that this is more or less a thick Android tablet with extra hardware built into the side. Apart from that, there's not much else, so let's get into the unboxing and explore. And speaking for the box, it is enormous, glossy, and feels very premium indeed. Inside is quite a treasure trove of parts, starting with an instruction manual and packing list. The main box is quite hefty and contains the Android tablet. You can see the tripod mount as well as the laser and projector on the side. A welcome addition is this microfiber carrying case for storage in between scanning. There's a very nice quality collapsible mini tripod for holding up the tablet, as well as a quick charge 3 standard charger and matching USB-C power cord. There's a long instruction and placement mat. It feels kind of like it's made out of wetsuit material. And besides some blue tack, there's a small adjustable tablet stand and then a series of these 3 checkered calibration cards. We have a sample object with this delightful painted and colored wooden bird, and then our final piece, which is this Bluetooth connected turntable for the tablet to rotate the object automatically during the scan. To start, we need to charge the tablet, but there's this horrible security sticker covering the port. With this hurdle cleared, we can start up the tablet and see that it really is just an Android tablet. And it even comes with some sort of terrible endless running game that I was really terrible at. What we're interested in, however, is the scanner app, which comes pre-installed. The booklet instructions, however, direct us to this website where we're meant to download the rest of the software for our PC. Trouble is, it asks for username and password, but there's no way to create an account. Instead, we need to switch it to email code mode, enter our email address, and then you'll be emailed a key which lasts for 300 seconds to allow you to log in. And on the inside, we have 3 or 4 instructional videos, some PDF manuals, and our main piece of PC software called 3D Model Process. We don't need that software until we've done some scans, so instead, let's look at how the scanner works. The mat is well done because it has markings on where to place all of the objects you need to scan. For smaller objects to be scanned presumably with greater detail, we put the turntable on position A with calibration card A in place. Our mid-range option is position B with calibration card B to match. And finally, for our biggest objects, the furthest away is C with a matching card again. In the scanner app, we select A, B or C from the settings tab, and then we're ready to calibrate. We place the matching card on the tablet stand in the middle of the turntable and adjust the top of the tripod to make sure that the pattern fits inside the blue guide box. After this, we press the go button, the turntable will rotate, pause, and then do the rest of the rotation before pausing a few more times towards the end of the movement. After this, there'll be a 5-second or so pause before the final beep and everything is done. You can see the process here happening in real time. The whole thing takes about 30 seconds and is light years ahead in terms of ease of use compared to the David laser scan setup that I used to use. With calibration out of the way, we'll remove our calibration grid and tablet stand and instead place our object that we'd like to scan in the center of the turntable. Here I'm spacing it up with a maker coin, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. Back on our tablet, we tap on the object to focus the camera, and then after that we press start scanning. As you can see, just like the structured light scanner I used 7 years ago, this one works very similarly. A series of black and white stripy patterns are projected onto the surface before all of the lights come on, and it takes a final image to capture the texture and color of that side of the object. One of the big improvements with this setup is the automatically controlled Bluetooth turntable. In the settings, you can pick how many sides you want the scan to take place from, and all of the movements after that are automatic. With my old school setup, I had a lazy Susan and I manually had to rotate it to try and guess the best angle to scan from. One more note, I'm in a fairly dark room here, but the darker the room, the better it's going to work, although this system seems to have a pretty good tolerance to not being in pitch black. When the scanning takes place, this tablet is powerful enough that it can do all of the post-processing and stitching in place without the PC. You can see here my alignment meant the very top of the bird was cut off, but that maker coin down the bottom definitely complicated things and it's going to make cleanup harder later on. If we go to the file list and then select the model again, we have additional options, such as switching the color texture on and off. We also have a simple plane cut feature where we can drag a plane up and down to remove the bottom of the object, but unfortunately that does leave the bottom open, and this means more post-processing before you can 3D print. I'm not sure what you'd want this for, but there's also an eraser mode with 3 different sizes, and anywhere you click, it's going to put a perfect circular hole in your scanned object. Fortunately, there's also an undo button with multiple steps to restore the object to a more workable state. Finally, we have an export menu. We can export as an STL for ready to 3D print objects or a PLY for post-processing on the PC. Because this is an Android tablet, we have a full on-screen keyboard to help us type in our file name. Let's talk about how you get the files off the tablet onto your PC. And the 3D model process software also has that same annoying login mode where we can't make a permanent account. There's meant to be an option on the tablet where you put in the IP address of your PC to transfer on your local network, but I couldn't get this to work either. What does work well is simply plugging the tablet in via USB and exploring it like a drive. You'll find a folder called Final Models where everything you've exported is present. The cloud feature will probably be pretty handy once it's sorted, but in the meantime, this is a very workable solution. If you open up the Ply file on the included software, you'll get a nice color preview that you wouldn't normally get with an STL. All I did for this one was clip the bottom to make it flat. We can then fill the hole with a planar flat surface and we're ready to export as an STL and print. I was pretty keen with this first test bird to see if the dimensional accuracy was there to reproduce in 3D. Apart from the top being cut off from my mistake in scanning and me shortening the bottom when I did the planar cut, I'd have to say this one seems pretty spot on. It was time to undertake some further testing. First up was this phone charger as a relatively common object. It scanned fairly well, minus the prongs on top, and of course the underside it can't see, so it has to make an estimate. Next up, this 3D printed Gyroid Cube. This would definitely prove to be a challenge. From certain angles, it looks somewhat like the shape, other ones are a little bit rougher, but it did manage to identify that some of the holes went the entire way through. I consider this one a torture test and it would need to be scanned from a lot more angles to be worthwhile. Next up, a drone battery, to see if you can make a holster or a replacement part for something of this nature. And this one, despite all of the different textures and surfaces, seems to be one of the better ones and should have enough accuracy to build something useful from. Next up, an Ender 3 carriage, which has metallic shiny surfaces which would be difficult to scan. And so it proved, with the general shape being pretty close and dimensionally even being quite accurate, but as you can see where there are reflections, there's big bulbous artifacts and quite a lot of post-processing would be needed on this to make it useful. This is something I would explore in my next scans. This vacuum cleaner takes up way too much room in one of my drawers, so I wanted to mount it to the wall, but with such a round, organic shape, it would be difficult to measure and model. Scanning would be difficult because it's both reflective and translucent. This made it impossible to scan properly, and the result shows the limitation of structured light scanning. There are things you can do to make it opaque, such as dusting it with some flour or some sort of light removable spray paint. You can also tape it up like I did here. This result is much better, and I can ignore the texture from the tape because all I need is the accurate shape of the geometry, which it did a good job of. I switched to Tinkercad, modeled up a very simple bracket, and then imported the STL of the scan, set it to a hole, and grouped everything together to cut out the interior shape. And here's the finished printed part in TPU. It would be extremely hard to measure that slope surface using traditional measuring techniques, so I'm pleased to report that the fit on this is really good, and I look forward to hanging this up on the wall with the vacuum out of the way. To finish up, I thought I would try and replicate this miniature from a board game I own. I expected this to be a huge challenge and test the capabilities of the scanner. To do this, I scanned it in position A from 12 sides with the high quality preset on, and I repeated this scanning twice, once to get the top of the model, and a second time with the model inverted on blue tack to get the underside. The included software has a merge feature where you bring in the two scans, and with a single button click, it analyzes the geometry, rotates and aligns for you. On a simpler model, this should be quite a powerful process, but on this complicated one, I had quite a lot of erroneous geometry that I needed to go into Mesh Mixer and manually remove. All up, I spent around 30 minutes cleaning up this model and getting it ready to print. That might sound like quite a lot of time, but with my skill set, it will be so much faster than learning a sculpting program and doing it from scratch. The model was manifold, so I exported it ready to resin print. After removing this from the printer and giving it a rinse in IPA, the first inspection looked very promising. Then came for me what I consider the worst part of resin printing, removing all of the support structures. The end result is definitely something I'm happy with. It's a tad oversized, but that was my fault with an unfamiliar slicer. But from most angles, it looks like quite an excellent copy of the original, save for the underside, where more work is needed to clean up where the supports were touching. A couple of more thoughts before I finish. The scanner is meant to have a vertical mode for tall objects, but there was no setting in the software to activate this, and when I tried to scan my daughter's doll, the resultant merging of the multiple scans definitely wasn't working as it should be. The main scanner, being a tablet, means it has an onboard battery and therefore runs without being plugged in. The turntable, however, does need to be plugged in despite having enough room for an internal battery. The whole setup could have been portable, and this seems like a wasted opportunity. Finally, this is expensive, but here's a redeeming feature. You are getting a portable tablet with a projector inbuilt, which means you could take it camping or to hotels and be able to project and play videos from the internet. It's built to be a scanner, but there is a little bit more value here. I think it's fair to say that my results were definitely mixed. And for the price, especially with those little niggles, it's hard to justify this unless you're someone that has a specific purpose and are going to use it all the time. With the right conditions, it does work quite flawlessly. You're going to need an object that's matte in finish, has limited hidden and internal geometry, and is not too big, just like this 3D print of the Thinker statue in grey. For less ideal objects, there are steps that you can do to improve your success, but depending on what the project is, it just might not be worth the trouble. That was my range of testing, but I'd love to know the types of things that you could use this for, and if you're interested in this as a product. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy 3D scanning and 3D printing. G'day, it's Michael again. If you liked the video, then please click like. If you want to see more content like this in future, click subscribe and make sure you click on the bell to receive every notification. If you really want to support the channel and see exclusive content, become a patron. Visit my Patreon page. See you next time.